You know, it makes such a difference the way we start doing our work and the intention we have in our work, that Rudolf Steiner speaks about, and he uses the term imponderabili. Is that imponderable? Is that a word? That it's not visible, it's not sensible, but he speaks of underneath the earth, like electric wires, there is this contact between the teacher and the children. And it makes such a difference when you do an exercise from one, let's say, I can't say it in English, I think. Gesinnung is the word in German. It means the mood you're in, your intentions, your inner thoughts, the inner pictures you work with makes a difference. When you do an exercise, when you think a human being is mechanical, then that works to the child. You don't say it, but it works. It's your intention. That's what you carry inside your soul. It works through the imponderability to the child, and it will react to that. So when you have this idea of the archetype of the human being, and you work with the child, that comes with it as well. Today I would like to give you some examples of it, and tomorrow again. But just to be briefly, yesterday I already mentioned the way that the human being moves. In outer science it's said, and that's correct of course, because they found it out, that from the brain through the nerves there comes in from an electric impulse, goes through the nervous system into the muscles, and there you go. But that's mechanical. There's nothing human behind it. But when you think of, when I have an intention to do something, it's enthusiasm, it's will, it's warmth, but that's soul warmth. And soul warmth is good, but it needs to become penetrating into the physical, and otherwise you can't move. So warmth is always the transition from the soul element into the physical. Warmth is the bridge. That's why it's so important that your room is sufficiently warmed in winter. Also classrooms and so forth. So that this warmth can bridge from the spirit, from the soul, spirit-soul element, into the physical. And you know what you do when you're cold. You see, you draw yourself together. So warmth, then you can expand. So there needs to be enough warmth. Not too much, of course, then you lose your consciousness. But anyway, the bridge is important. So, and from this soul warmth, it becomes physical warmth. There is the spiritual bridge, warmth. Where Saturn started, actually. Before that there was nothing, not really nothing, but it was all spiritual. But then the warmth is the bridge. And then this warmth influences the air and the light. That's the second element. And this air and light gets like the wind on a lake or on a river. It moves the etheric, it moves the watery element. And from that watery element, even the physical is able to move. So that's how we move. That's how the will works. That's the one pole that is in Muspelheim, the lower part of us. Yeah? Now, this is an idea, but that takes us away from the mechanical idea. And I think Rudolf Steiner said, when we don't get rid of the idea of the motor nerves, we won't get rid of the materialism, because it's a materialistic picture of the human being. And when we carry that inward, this picture, and it's very difficult to rethink the whole process. We are all, let's say, under the influence of materialism. That's what we have learned. So we have to struggle to think that it's different. But it just the struggling is already something that comes to the children. You understand what I'm saying? So, and that's the same thing when we do the zoo exercises, for instance. When we think that we are repeating animal movements, that's a materialistic thought. That's Darwin. You see that there was first primitive movements, primitive animals, and then survival of the fittest, and then there was another layer, and then survival of the fittest again, and so forth. That's the evolution. From, of course, a brilliant idea. But we have to rethink it, and that it's the human being that is in development. And every time the human being makes a new step, but this is still spiritual soul. It makes a new step of development, and what it's not to be used is led behind. How do you say it? Put behind. So, and fixed. It cannot evolve any longer. Then the next step comes. And when the next step of development comes, that what is not able, what the human being cannot use to get to the next step, is left behind. And so in all the animals and all those in the development of the animal kingdom, all these different layers, which you also see in all the movements, that is the human being. So it's not that we are repeating animal movements, we are repeating the movement patterns of the human development. These are human movements patterns. You understand what I'm saying? And that makes a difference, the way you look at it. And we are so easily say the brain is a computer. It's not. The computer is a brain. You understand? A camera, the eye is a camera. It's not true. The camera is an eye. So the human being is the center of the universe. That's anthroposophy, wisdom of the human being. The human being is the center of the universe. And everything in the outside world is related to the human being and not the other way around. Don't you think? And it makes such a difference. Now, I always go back to this 1909 diagram. Maybe I will draw it on the blackboard, but I won't start with it right away, because otherwise you think, oh, there it is again. Maybe I will do. Anyway, but I think that's also important when we do our work and we explore in the outside world what there's researched and found. And I think the outside world is far more better than the anthroposophists in doing all this research. They have more money even also, because the time of the rich anthroposophists is gone, isn't it? Well, anyway, but it's so dangerous that you think, oh, this is a nice exercise. Whoop, we take it in. I think what we should do, that's our task, and I think that's why we gather together, is that we always should step first and watch and stop and think, how is it related to the archetype? To give you the example, yesterday some of you or most of you were with the rotation exercises. And you will have experience, or when you saw it, or when you've experienced it yourself, that there was something yoga in it. Yoga kind of things, you see, and where does it come from? I can tell you the story because I brought it from Germany to the West. There was a German physiotherapist, a lady, and she has worked this rotation exercises, and even more than those three we have demonstrated. And in the German, one of the German colleagues, they found that and said, well, this is something interesting. Can we use it? So what we did is we tried to connect and check and do it. By doing it, what's happening and how is it related? Can we use it? Actually, that is what Audrey McAllen did herself with the beanbag exercises. Jean Hunt was a curative eurythmist, and she had developed these beanbag exercises because she experienced that the children were not able to do the copper rod exercises. They were too difficult. So she thought there must be something developed that's before I can give them the copper rod exercises and do all the stuff. They need something else. So that's how she developed these beanbag series. And then she showed it to Audrey, and Audrey went through it and tried to connect it with our archetype, and she just had, I think, 1 or 2 changes in order to get it correct with the currents. And then it's got out into the world. And that was what we did also with these rotation exercises. Now when